them all what I'm made up. Strut down the hall, won't stop till I get enough.
Ever think about like those super secret national security meetings you see in movies? You know, all hush-hush and locked down?
Oh, yeah.
Well, get this. Some seriously sensitive conversations might have been happening in a much more everyday kind of place, like just a plain old group chat.
Wow, a group chat?
But on an encrypted messaging app. And now that whole scenario, that's right in the middle of a legal battle.
Yeah, we're diving deep into this one.
Yeah.
A federal judge just recently issued a pretty significant order.
Okay.
It's all about a Signal group chat. Allegedly, it was used by some Trump administration officials to talk about, get this, a possible U.S. military operation in Yemen.
Oh, wow.
Our main source here is a news article. It's got all the details about the judge's decision and the huge wave of reactions it's caused. But this goes way deeper than just some legal document.
Oh, yeah.
It gives us a glimpse into, how these really important discussions are happening, and also what could happen if those records, if they just disappear.
So a federal judge stepped in here. But what even led up to this? What was actually being talked about in this chat and who was in it?
So it all started with a report in The Atlantic. They're the ones who revealed that there's this Signal group chat, and it supposedly had some really high-ranking people from the Trump administration in it.
Okay.
We're talking about folks like National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, Vice President J.D. Vance, even Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and a bunch of others too.
Got it. Big names.
But here's a real curveball. The Atlantic's own editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, he was supposedly in this chat too. Apparently, it was by accident, but still.
Hold on. So the editor of The Atlantic just happens to be in on a discussion about, military operations. That's a twist I did not see coming. And when exactly was all this alleged chatting going on?
So, according to the report, this all happened between March 11th and March 15th, 2025. And the things they were talking about, really sensitive stuff, like down to the details, nitty-gritty of a potential U.S. attack on those Houthi militants in Yemen, talking strategy, the exact timing, even the specific types of weapons they might use, and then how they would sequence everything.
Wow, that's the kind of information you'd think would be locked down, super tight, nowhere near a chance of getting out. And then there's the whole self-destructing message thing.
Right. That's a huge part of this. So they were using the Signal app's auto-delete feature, apparently. Some of the messages were said to disappear after just 1 week, some after 4.
Wow.
And that brings up a big question. If these high-level discussions about national security, if they're happening this way, how can we keep track of those decisions? Understand them later.
Right.
It's like modern communication technology clashing with, traditional record keeping.
Right. It's like this vital record of strategy, decisions, just programmed to vanish. And that's where American oversight comes in, right? The watchdog group.
Right.
What did they do?
They jumped right in,
Right.
Filed a lawsuit in U.S. District Court. Their main argument, using a messaging app with that auto-delete for official business, probably violated the Federal Records Act.
Oh, I see.
That act.
Yeah.
It makes sure records about government activities are preserved for transparency and accountability.
Right. Okay. So what were they asking the court to do? Did they want to see the messages right away?
Not right away, no. Their goal was to stop those records from, possibly disappearing. Yep. They asked for a court order to force certain officials and agencies to save the chat records.
Makes sense.
Specifically named some people like Hegseth. Then there was Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Scott Bessent at Treasury, and the National Archives, too. All responsible for making sure these messages didn't just get deleted automatically.
So not about seeing the messages, not about punishing anyone, just about making sure those potential records were kept safe. Okay, so then the judge made his decision. Chief Judge James E. Boasberg, U.S. District Court in D.C., what did he order?
Judge Boasberg got right to it. He ordered a bunch of government agencies to preserve all those Signal communications.
Okay.
We're talking Defense Department, State Department, Office of the Director of National Intelligence, CIA, Treasury Department, and the National Archives, all between March 11th and 15th.
Wow, so a lot of agencies. He must have thought these discussions could have touched a lot of different parts of the government.
Absolutely. And he gave them a really short deadline. They had to submit a declaration by the next Monday, saying exactly how they'd preserved everything.
So a quick response from the court. He must have seen a real need to act fast. Our sources mention a pretty big uproar after this. What went down on Capitol Hill?
Oh, the whole signal chat thing definitely set off some fireworks. Democrats, they were really outraged, calling for investigations. Some even said Waltz and Hegseth should be fired, worried that using Signal like that, with such sensitive information, could put American lives at risk, even national security.
So a lot of concern about how they handled this.
A lot of concern. It shows you how sensitive people are about military operations. Even the way they talk about it can become a big deal.
And what was the White House saying about all of this? Did they see the issue?
Well, they mostly defended the Trump officials involved. According to our sources, they kind of went after The Atlantic. They said it was the mainstream media and that they had a political agenda.
I see. So focusing on who said it, not what was said.
Exactly. They didn't really address the whole Signal thing head on.
So instead of talking about whether using Signal was right or wrong, they questioned the motives of the people who brought it up. Interesting. What about the Justice Department? Weren't they involved too?
Oh, yeah, for sure. At first, they were against the restraining order American Oversight wanted. They said they were already working on preserving records with the different agencies.
Okay.
And get this, they actually claimed that what the chat participants did to preserve the records, that it was not reviewable by the court.
Not reviewable? That doesn't sound very transparent.
Yeah, a pretty strong stance on the limits of the court's power, to oversee things. But then there was a bit of a change in their position.
Right. What happened?
So later on, the Justice Department admitted that because they had to respond so quickly to American oversight, they hadn't really looked into the whole auto-delete thing very carefully.
So they kind of missed a key part of it, the fact that these messages were intentionally set to disappear.
Sounds like it. It seems like they might have underestimated that. But even with all that, the government also said that at least one agency has saved some of the conversation already.
Really?
Yeah, they claim they found a, quote, partial version of the chat, preserved it, and copied it into their official record-keeping system.
Partial version. That leaves a lot of questions.
Absolutely. Like, how much of the chat is in this partial version? Did they capture all the important decisions, discussions? It's pretty telling that they're being so vague about it.
So what did American Oversight think about Judge Boasberg's order? Seemed like they saw it as a big win.
Yeah, they did. Chioma Chukwu, their interim executive director, said the ruling was an important step toward accountability. They stressed that the public has a right to know how decisions about war and national security are made.
Of course.
Their point being, that right to know shouldn't be messed with by using communication methods that are designed to, limit records.
Right. Back to that tension we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
Now, on top of the legal stuff, it seems like Congress wants to look into this further, too.
That's right. Several Democrats, even a senior Republican, they've all formally asked for Inspector General investigations into this whole thing. This came after hearings where House and Senate Intelligence Committees questioned Gabbard and Ratcliffe. Specifically, the Senate Armed Services Committee chairman, he's a Republican, and the committee's top Democrat, they sent a letter straight to the Defense Department's Inspector General.
So concern on both sides of the aisle. It seems like lawmakers are taking this pretty seriously.
Oh, absolutely.
And what did they want the Inspector General to look into?
Well, they were pretty thorough in their request. They want to know exactly what was said on that Signal app, what steps were taken, to deal with it once it came out, and a full review of the Defense Department's rules about using these kinds of messaging apps for official business. They also want to know about the policies for classifying and declassifying information. And this is key, whether those policies are different between the White House, the Department of Defense, the intelligence community, and other agencies on the National Security Council.
Wow, that's a lot. It seems like they're worried that different parts of the government might not be on the same page about all of this.
It seems that way, yeah.
This whole thing really does make you think about how we handle sensitive government communications, especially in a world that's so digital now. And speaking of, our source also talks about Judge Boasberg himself. This isn't his first time dealing with a case involving the Trump administration, right?
Right. Judge Boasberg had already ruled against the Trump administration before. It was a big case, had to do with deporting Venezuelan migrants. And that ruling, it made President Trump really mad.
Yeah, the article mentions that Trump actually called Judge Boasberg some pretty harsh names and even suggested he should be impeached. That's pretty extreme, to say the least.
For sure, it was. And our sources point out that those comments were so out there that even Chief Justice John G. Roberts Jr. felt he had to say something.
Yeah.
He made a rare public statement saying, look, impeachment isn't the answer just because you don't like a judge's ruling.
Right, a key reminder about respecting the judiciary.
Absolutely. Separation of powers and all that.
And our source also says Judge Boasberg talked about the situation directly during the Signal chat hearing.
Yeah, he knew how much attention this case was getting, so he did something a little unusual. He started the hearing by clearing up a few things. He reminded everyone that new cases are assigned randomly.
Yeah.
So there was no way he was specifically chosen for this case. And he made it very clear what the case was about and what it wasn't about. He said, look, American oversight isn't trying to get the Signal messages released to the public right now, and they're not asking for anyone to be punished at this point. The big issue, he said, is making sure the Federal Records Act is followed. That's the law that's supposed to keep the government transparent.
Okay, so back to the basics of good governance. And finally, the article mentions that using encrypted messaging apps like Signal, it's becoming more common. Not just for government employees, but military planners too. It seems like this might be a sign of things to come.
Yeah, it's a trend to keep an eye on. Those encrypted apps, they're convenient, they offer better security, especially when you're dealing with sensitive info. But as this whole situation shows, using them for government business, especially with the auto-delete on, it brings up some tough questions about transparency, accountability, even the basic need to keep government records. For history, for oversight, this case could really set a precedent for how we view these technologies in the future, especially when it comes to government communication.
Absolutely. So to wrap up this deep dive, we've got a federal judge ordering the Trump administration to preserve a Signal chat that supposedly had sensitive military plans about Yemen in it. This came after a report revealed that top officials were using this chat, talking about strategy and everything, and that the messages were set to disappear automatically. The whole thing has stirred up a huge debate about whether it's okay to use these vanishing message apps for government business, and how important it is to stick to those record-keeping laws, especially when it comes to national security. Makes you think about how technology is changing the way we govern.
It definitely does. This whole Signal chat thing really highlights the clash between how fast digital communication is changing and those core principles of transparency and accountability, the things that are so important for a democracy to work.
It does. So here's something to think about. If it's so easy to send digital messages, have them go everywhere instantly, and then just make them vanish with a few taps, what does that mean for accountability down the road? What does it mean for keeping accurate historical records, especially when we're talking about those big decisions that affect national security? In a world of instant information where messages can just disappear, what does it even mean to be truly informed about the decisions that shape our lives?
That is a great question to leave us with.
And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Until next time.
See.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're Bobby dog. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till